first thing you notice is not the bird. It is the stillness. The kind that settles over a backyard just after sunrise, when the air is cool enough to carry the scent of damp grass and the light slips quietly through the maple branches. Somewhere beyond the fence, a lawn sprinkler clicks to life. A distant wind stirs the highest leaves. Everything feels ordinary, familiar, until you look up. There, on the same weathered branch it has chosen more times than you can remember, sits a blue jay. It isn't calling. It isn't searching for food. It isn't hopping from limb to limb the way blue jays usually do. It is simply watching. Not the feeder beneath it. Not the squirrel crossing the fence. You. For a moment you tell yourself it means nothing. Birds look around. They notice movement. That's what wild animals do. And yet something about this feels strangely difficult to dismiss. You step forward a few feet. It doesn't fly. You pause beside the porch railing, coffee warming your hands, and the silence somehow grows deeper instead of breaking. If you've ever experienced a moment like this, when an ordinary morning suddenly feels layered with something you can't quite explain, you're in exactly the right place. If you're new here, subscribe before you leave, because what you're about to discover may forever change the way you look at the birds waiting just outside your door. The remarkable part isn't that the blue jay is there. It's that this may not be the first time it has seen you today, and that is where everything begins to change. Because long before you ever notice that flash of blue among the branches, there is a quiet possibility that it had already noticed you, learning your mornings one small detail at a time, until one day, without a sound or a warning, you became part of the world it chose to remember. Perhaps you have felt something like this before without ever speaking about it. You walk outside at nearly the same time every morning, not because you planned to, but because life quietly arranged itself that way. The same back door opens. The same wooden step creaks beneath your feet. The same mug rests between your hands as the morning slowly wakes around you. After enough days, those little routines stop feeling remarkable. They become invisible, even to you. But nature has always paid closer attention to repetition than people do. Maybe there was a morning when you looked toward the fence almost without thinking, and somehow you already knew where that flash of blue would be. Not because you saw it, because you expected it. There is a strange comfort in that feeling, the kind you rarely question until it happens often enough to become impossible to ignore. Most people dismiss those moments almost immediately. They tell themselves they are noticing patterns that are not really there. They laugh softly, shake their heads, and continue with the day. Yet something small remains, a quiet feeling that lingers longer than logic usually allows. It is difficult to explain why certain encounters stay with us, while hundreds of ordinary mornings disappear without leaving a trace. Perhaps it is because some experiences arrive without asking to be understood. They simply ask to be noticed. The blue jay is still there when you glance up again, almost as if it had been waiting for the exact moment your attention returned. It does not seem impatient. It does not seem afraid. It simply holds its place inside the morning, and somehow the space between you no longer feels quite as empty as it did before. But the truly remarkable part has nothing to do with what you are beginning to notice. It has everything to do with what that quiet observer may have been learning about you all along. The hidden part of this story does not begin with mystery. It begins with attention. Every morning, while most people are still thinking about their plans for the day, the natural world is quietly measuring patterns. The length of a pause before a door opens. The direction of a familiar walk across the yard. The place where someone always stops to look at the sky before taking another sip of coffee. These moments seem too ordinary to matter, yet they happen with remarkable consistency. Blue jays are known for noticing the details that other birds often ignore. They remember where food appeared weeks ago. They recognize changing landscapes. They learn which sounds belong and which ones do not. But perhaps the most fascinating detail is how patiently they observe before making decisions. Long before a blue jay ever lands closer to a person, it spends countless mornings watching from a comfortable distance. One branch becomes another. One fence post becomes the limb of a maple tree. It watches the rhythm instead of the moment. Whether you rush outside on Monday or linger a little longer on Saturday, whether your footsteps are hurried after the rain or slower beneath clear autumn skies, none of this feels dramatic while it is happening. That is exactly why most people never notice it. The relationship is forming long before either side realizes it exists. Some researchers describe this as advanced pattern recognition. Others simply call it intelligent adaptation. And many people, after experiencing these quiet encounters for themselves, find it difficult not to wonder whether something else is unfolding beneath the surface. Not something supernatural, something quieter than that. A silent exchange of familiarity that grows one ordinary morning at a time until, almost without warning, you begin to realize you are no longer looking at a stranger, and perhaps, in its own careful way, neither is the bird. By now, it is tempting to believe that everything you are feeling exists only in your imagination. After all, it is only a bird standing quietly in a tree. But this is where the story becomes more interesting, because modern research has revealed something that feels almost too remarkable to be ordinary. Blue jays belong to the corvid family, a group of birds widely recognized for extraordinary memory and problem solving. Scientists have found that corvids are capable of recognizing individual human faces and remembering them long after a single encounter has passed. They do not simply react to movement, they build associations, safety, routine, predictability. Every calm morning becomes another piece of information quietly stored away. Suddenly, that familiar branch across the yard no longer feels like a random perch. It becomes an observation point, not because the bird is judging you, but because it is learning whether the world remains as dependable today as it was yesterday. You begin to notice the smallest things. The blue jay tilts its head just slightly before you move. It waits until you settle into the same chair before flying lower. Even the morning breeze seems to pause for a heartbeat as sunlight catches the blue feathers against the leaves. None of these moments prove anything extraordinary on their own, yet together they create something difficult to ignore. Science would simply say that an intelligent bird is recognizing a familiar human within its territory. That explanation is both satisfying and incomplete, because explanations describe behavior. They do not fully explain why these quiet encounters leave such a lasting impression on the human heart. Perhaps that is where intuition quietly steps in, filling the gentle space that facts respectfully leave behind, inviting you to wonder whether recognition can sometimes feel deeper than either species completely understands. After enough mornings, the distance begins to change so gradually that neither of you seems to notice it at first. The branch is no longer the highest one in the maple. It is the lower limb that catches the first light. A week later, it is the cedar fence only a few yards away. Then one quiet morning, without ceremony, the blue jay lands on the edge of the bird bath while you are still standing on the porch. It does not stay long, only a few seconds. But something about those seconds feels unexpectedly important. You resist the urge to step closer. Instead, you remain exactly where you are, letting the silence settle naturally between you. The coffee cools a little in your hands. Somewhere nearby, a breeze carries the scent of fresh pine and damp earth through the yard. The bird lifts its crest, studies the space around you, then returns to searching the water as though your presence has become another ordinary part of the landscape. That quiet acceptance is easy to overlook, yet it is often how trust first appears in the natural world. Not through dramatic moments, but through the absence of fear, where fear once existed. Before long, you find yourself noticing the smallest rituals, the soft scrape of its claws against weathered wood, the brief pause before it folds its wings, the way morning sunlight catches shades of blue that seemed almost invisible before. Without realizing it, you begin looking toward the maple before you even open the back door. The habit has quietly become your own, and perhaps that is the most remarkable change of all. Somewhere between familiar mornings and shared silence, the bird has become part of your daily rhythm, while you, just as quietly, have become part of its world as well. But the moments that follow will begin to suggest that this quiet familiarity may reach further than simple routine ever could. Then, almost without realizing it, you stop measuring the mornings by the calendar and begin measuring them by whether the blue jay appears. On some days it arrives before the first ray of sunlight reaches the porch railing. On others it waits until the breeze begins moving through the maple leaves. There is no perfect schedule, yet there is an unmistakable rhythm. The remarkable part is not that the bird returns. Wild birds return to places they consider dependable every day. The remarkable part is how your own awareness begins to change alongside it. You notice the silence before its wings break across the yard. You find yourself glancing toward the familiar branch during conversations, while watering the flowers, even while carrying groceries from the car. It is as though some quiet part of your attention has started listening for something that words cannot describe. Many people who spend years observing birds speak of a similar shift. They stop asking whether a particular encounter means anything extraordinary and begin appreciating how extraordinary simple recognition already is. Yet every so often, something happens that gently unsettles even that peaceful explanation. On mornings when the yard feels unusually still, when your thoughts are heavier than usual and you linger on the porch a little longer than normal, the blue jay often seems to appear without fanfare, settling nearby with the same calm patience it always has. There may be perfectly ordinary reasons for that timing. Intelligent birds are exceptional at reading routines, and subtle changes in human behavior can become part of the patterns they recognize. Still, something about those quiet coincidences has inspired stories across generations, not because they prove anything beyond science, but because they awaken something inside us that science does not try to measure. And it is precisely there, in that quiet space between observation and intuition, that the next chapter of this story begins. Because every morning of careful watching eventually leads to a decision that neither you nor the bird can postpone forever. Eventually, every relationship in nature reaches a quiet turning point. Not a dramatic moment that announces itself, but one so subtle that it can pass unnoticed unless you have been paying attention from the very beginning. One morning, you step onto the porch exactly as you always do. The blue jay is already there. It watches you for a moment. Then, instead of retreating to the tallest branches, it remains where the early sunlight reaches the fence. The distance between you has become smaller than it used to be, not because either of you forced it, but because hundreds of ordinary mornings have slowly reshaped what once felt unfamiliar. Scientists might describe this as habituation, the gradual confidence that develops when repeated experiences remain safe and predictable. But many people believe there is another layer to moments like these, one that is less about certainty and more about awareness. They speak of certain animals arriving in our lives during seasons when we have quietly changed ourselves, long before we recognize that change within. Whether that is spiritual or simply the remarkable sensitivity of the natural world is something no study can fully answer. Still, something about this feels difficult to ignore. The bird is no longer reacting only to your movements. It seems to recognize your presence before anything else happens. And perhaps, in your own quiet way, you have begun recognizing something as well. Not because you expect a sign every morning, but because these encounters have taught you to notice details that once disappeared into the background of everyday life. The wind through the maple leaves, the pause before the first birdsong, the feeling that the world is paying attention in ways you never considered before. If there is a deeper meaning hidden here, it may not be that the blue jay has chosen to come closer. It may be that both of you have slowly reached the same quiet understanding, and what happens after that understanding is what makes this story impossible to forget. There comes a morning when you stop searching for explanations. The question quietly fades, replaced by something gentler. You no longer wonder why the blue jay is there before you open the back door. You simply notice the cool air against your face, the soft light stretching across the lawn, the familiar silhouette resting among the branches as though it has always belonged to the landscape. The yard has not changed. The maple still sways with the same breeze. The fence still catches the first warmth of the rising sun. Somewhere in the distance, another bird begins to sing, followed by a second, until the silence slowly fills with life again. And yet everything feels different because you are seeing it differently. That may be the quiet gift these moments leave behind. They do not ask you to believe anything extraordinary. They simply remind you to pay attention. Many people spend years waiting for life to reveal itself through grand events, while nature has always preferred whispers. A feather catching the morning light, a pause that lasts one heartbeat longer than expected, a pair of watchful eyes meeting yours before looking away without urgency. Whether these encounters are nothing more than remarkable animal intelligence, or something your own intuition gently recognizes, is a question you may never answer completely. Perhaps it does not need an answer. Perhaps the meaning lives inside the act of noticing itself. You stand there a little longer than usual, listening to leaves rustle overhead while the blue jay remains perfectly still. Neither of you seems to expect anything from the other anymore. There is only a quiet familiarity shared between two lives crossing paths in the same small corner of the world. And in that peaceful stillness, you begin to understand that some of the deepest connections are not built through words at all, but through the gentle repetition of simply showing up morning after morning, until the ordinary becomes quietly unforgettable. The seasons continue, as they always do. Summer leaves slowly surrender to autumn colors. Crisp mornings become quiet, winter dawns. The familiar branch grows bare, then green again, while the yard keeps repeating the same gentle rhythm that first drew your attention without you ever realizing it. Some mornings the blue jay appears before the sun reaches the fence. Other mornings it does not come at all. Strangely, the absence no longer feels like disappointment. It feels like part of the same conversation, because by now you understand something that was impossible to see on that first ordinary morning. The greatest change was never the bird. It was the way you began moving through the world. You started noticing the silence between birdsong, the shifting light across old wooden boards, the patience hidden inside nature's smallest routines. And perhaps, without intending to, you also began listening more carefully to your own intuition. Many people believe that the natural world reflects back the attention we are willing to give it. Others believe these moments are simply what happens when intelligent creatures learn to trust one another across the quiet distance between different lives. Perhaps both can be true. Perhaps neither explanation needs to erase the other. Some mysteries are not invitations to solve them. They are invitations to live with them. Thank you for staying until the very end and sharing this quiet journey. If stories like this help you slow down and see the world with fresh eyes, subscribe before you leave, because there are still countless moments hidden in nature that most of us pass every day without ever truly seeing. Until we meet again, take one more look outside your window tomorrow morning. Somewhere among the branches, beneath the first soft light of a new day, a small blue feather may catch the sun for just a moment. Maybe it was only a bird, but somehow, it never felt like only a bird.